Ladies and gentlemen, gather around the crackling campfire and prepare to be spellbound by the remarkable tale of Sam Cartwright, a widowed cowboy whose life took a perilous turn on the blistering plains of the Old West. Accused of a crime he didn't commit, Sam faced the gallows alone until a ragged, desperate young woman named Clara Belle Woodward stepped forward and stunned the entire courtroom by declaring, "He's my husband." What followed was a tempest of secrets, heartbreak, and unwavering loyalty. So settle in and listen closely. For this is a story brimming with unexpected twists and a love forged in the toughest frontier of all the human heart. In the year 1882, the dusty frontier town of Stone Tree Gulch baked under a relentless sun. A lone horseman trudged wearily down the main street, drawing cautious stares from townsfolk leaning on rickety porches. His name was Sam Cartwright, a man whose face bore deep lines from years spent herding cattle and defending his land against rustlers. 4 months earlier, death had come knocking at his door, ripping away the woman who had given him hope, his beloved wife, Sarah. She had passed quietly in the night from a fever no doctor could cure. Since then, Sam had been drifting in a haze of grief. Unable to find solace in the emptiness of his homestead, he sold the cattle for pennies on the dollar. He donated half of his meager earnings to the local pastor, Reverend Giles Harrington, a charitable man who had performed Sarah's funeral. Though Sam possessed a restless, wandering soul, he owed the Reverend a debt of gratitude for guiding him through that heartbreaking time. His only companion now was a muscular bay horse named Lightning, the last reminder of a life spent mending fences and building a future. Sam had little appetite or ambition left. By the time he reached Stone Tree Gulch, he was simply searching for a place where he might gather his wits, take a job, and figure out if life had any meaning left to offer. That same day, in the shadow of the saloon, a young girl leaned against a barrel, her tattered dress fluttering in the hot breeze. The girl's name was Clara Belle Woodward, no older than 20, though sorrow and hardship had etched her cheeks with weariness beyond her years. People brushed past without a second glance. She was from the outskirts of the territory, born into squalor and orphan from the time she could remember. Clara Belle survived by collecting scraps from tavern kitchens and sweeping floors in exchange for cold biscuits. She had come to Stone Tree Gulch in hopes of finding honest work, but her fragile frame and tattered clothes worked against her. Most proprietors looked at her with a mix of pity and scorn. As Sam walked by, he caught a glimpse of the desperation in Clara's eyes. The memory of his late wife's kindness surfaced like a cool spring in the desert. He paused to see if this girl needed help, maybe a few coins for a meal. She shrank back at first, suspicious. Life had taught her not to trust men easily. "Ma'am, you all right?" he asked, tipping his dusty hat. She hesitated. "I'm fine." Her voice was barely a whisper. He glanced at the dried mud caked on her worn boots. "You don't look fine. Name's Sam Cartwright, Clara Belle Woodward." She finally offered, clinging to a small bag slung over her shoulder. The moment could have passed in silence, but Sam rummaged in his pocket and pulled out 2 coins. "You hungry?" he asked, offering them to her. At first, Clara was too proud to accept, but hunger gnawed at her insides like a feral dog. She gingerly took the coins, mumbled her thanks, and hurried toward the cafe. Sam watched half smiling, recalling how Sarah had always insisted on helping strangers. He felt a stirring of warmth in his chest, something close to hope, though he quickly tamped it down. Just as Sam was about to find lodging in the local boarding house, he heard a voice calling Cartwright. He turned around to see Ross Charlton, a rancher with slicked-back hair and a glint of malice in his eye. Ross was accompanied by two men, Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy, both known for their taste for trouble. Sam's spine stiffened. He recognized that cocky stride from years back. Ross Charlton had once tried to swindle Sam out of a prime stretch of grazing land. Sarah had intervened, producing land deeds that proved Sam's rightful ownership. Ross lost that battle, and he had never forgotten. "Well, I'll be a rattlesnake's uncle." Samuel Cartwright. "What a surprise," Ross drawled, stepping closer with a mocking grin. "Heard you been wandering like a ghost after your precious Sarah passed." Sam's fists clenched, but he forced a calm he didn't quite feel. "I'm not looking for trouble, Ross." Ross chuckled. "Trouble's always looking for men like you. You can't outrun your fate, Cartwright." He patted Sam on the shoulder with feigned camaraderie. "Funny how some folks just can't manage to keep what's theirs." His words dripped with venom, and Sam could almost taste the hostility in the air. Nonetheless, Sam turned away. He was too exhausted for a fight. But something flickered in Ross's eyes, a promise of future reckonings. Sam sensed that this run-in was only the beginning of a new nightmare. A week passed in Stone Tree Gulch. Sam found odd jobs mending a broken fence for the blacksmith's corral, hauling lumber for the undertaker, and helping the widow Parker fix her leaking roof. Though he barely spoke, people appreciated his competence and paid what they could. In the evenings, Sam would wait by the cafe scanning for Clara Bell, hoping she had found some measure of comfort. She would often appear just as the sun set her thin shoulders drooping from a day of fruitless searching for steady work. One evening, Sam mustered the courage to invite her to share a bowl of stew inside the cafe. At first, she refused. But Sam insisted I'd be obliged if you kept me company. Miss Clara Bell. She relented, and over steaming bowls of rabbit stew she spoke timidly of her life before Stone Tree Gulch. She had grown up in a dirt-floor shack outside Lonesome Creek with an ailing mother who died when Clara was 15. She never knew her father. Since then, she'd wandered from one town to the next, hoping to earn enough to escape the cycle of poverty. Sam listened, nodding solemnly. He offered no tales of his own heartbreak, but Clara sensed something haunted about the cowboy's gaze. Before parting ways that evening, Sam pressed 2 more coins into her hand. "For tomorrow's meal," he said. "Don't skip on breakfast." She shook her head in disbelief, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive. Finding none, she smiled a small, cautious smile that might have broken Sam's heart if he wasn't so numb to pain already. 5 days later, the serenity of Stone Tree Gulch shattered. The bank was robbed at high noon. A masked bandit, tall with broad shoulders, had walked into the Stone Tree Gulch Bank and Trust, holding a Colt .45. Without a word, he shot a hole in the ceiling, demanded the cashier empty the safe, and galloped away with 2 sacks of coin. Sheriff Bradley Matthews, a lawman with a tough jaw and a sharp eye, gave chase but lost the suspect in the rocky canyons. Witnesses said the robber wore a black duster, a red bandana over his face, and rode a muscular bay horse with a crooked blaze on its forehead. When word reached Sam, his blood turned cold. Lightning, his own bay horse, had such a blaze. The rumor mill began churning. Folks whispered that Sam Cartwright was seen around town with suspiciously heavy pockets. Others claimed Sam had once threatened the bank manager, which was a lie. The sheriff, hearing these rumors, grew wary. By the next morning, Sam was jolted awake in his boarding house room by the sound of pounding on the door. Sheriff Bradley and 2 deputies barged in, guns drawn. "Sam Cartwright, the sheriff, announced you're under arrest for armed robbery." Chaos erupted as Sam tried to protest. "This is a mistake," he insisted, struggling, while the deputies chained his hands. He spat out the truth. He had been at the far side of town, helping Widow Parker fix her roof at noon. But the sheriff was unimpressed. Widow Parker confirmed Sam's story, but rumor had it she was losing her memory, and the sheriff didn't fully trust her recollection. Adding to the suspicion was the fact that Sam indeed rode a bay horse with a distinctive blaze. Sheriff Bradley locked Sam in a holding cell, promising a fair trial. Yet the energy in town seemed stacked against Sam. Ross Charlton's name kept surfacing. A few claimed to have seen him wearing a black duster the day of the robbery, but no one dared speak too loudly. Charlton was powerful, and rumor had it he had powerful friends. For 3 days, Sam languished in jail. He tried to think of who could vouch for him, besides Widow Parker. Then one afternoon, he heard footsteps in the hall. Pressing his face to the cell bars, he saw a petite figure peeking around the corner. "Mr. Cartwright," came a tremulous voice. It was Clara Bell. She stepped closer, her eyes wide with sympathy. I heard you've been arrested." Sam exhaled a shaky breath, relief mingling with embarrassment. "It's all a misunderstanding, Miss Clara. Problem is, I don't have a lawyer or enough coin to hire one." She bit her lip, looked away for a moment, then whispered, "I have no money either, but I can try to ask around, ask for help." Sam almost laughed at the notion of this waif-like girl changing the tide, but her earnest face made him swallow his cynicism. "Thank you," he said, pressing his forehead to the cold iron bars. "You be careful out there." A makeshift courtroom was arranged in the back room of the Stone Tree Gulch Saloon. The local judge, Theodore Whitaker, was a tall, imposing figure with salt and pepper hair. In this frontier justice system, quick decisions were common, and the penalty for armed robbery often meant a noose. On trial day, Sam was hauled in wrists chained. Townsfolk gathered to watch, including Ross Charlton and his cronies, who stood in the rear with smug expressions. Clara Bell managed to squeeze into the back row, her eyes darting nervously from face to face. The prosecutor, a stern man named Ernest Hardy, presented witnesses who claimed they saw Sam's horse galloping away from the bank. Another claimed Sam had once mentioned his frustration at never having enough money to save his ranch. The judge listened occasionally, nodding occasionally, frowning. Sam's only defense was the shaky testimony of Widow Parker, who insisted Sam was up on her roof at noon. The prosecutor pointed out that a man wearing a red bandana over his face could easily be mistaken for Sam. He implied that the widow, being elderly and half-blind, might have confused the timing. The trial seemed hopelessly stacked against Sam. The crowd murmured about his guilt. Ross Charlton stood near the saloon bar, swirling whiskey in his glass, exchanging knowing smirks with Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy. Midway through, Judge Whitaker recessed for the day, clearly leaning toward a guilty verdict. Sam's final chance would be the next morning, during closing arguments. Clara Bell slipped into the sheriff's office when no one was looking, bringing Sam a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He clutched it gratefully. He hadn't been fed since that morning. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking a bite. Clara Bell's eyes shimmered with tears. "It's not right," she whispered. "You didn't do anything." Everyone knows you're innocent. Or they should. Sam took a shaky breath. I don't reckon the truth matters much if no one is willing to stand up for me. She paused, twisting the hem of her skirt. I have a plan, she said, voice trembling. You won't like it, but it might just save you. It's the only way. He frowned. What are you talking about? Miss Clara Bell. She shook her head as if to scatter her thoughts. Just trust me. She managed, stepping away. I'll be there tomorrow. Sam felt a jolt of alarm. He tried to ask more, but she hurried out, leaving him with a swirl of confusion. The next morning, the saloon-turned courtroom was overflowing. Spectators lined the back walls. Sam sat handcuffed at a small table alone. Despair etched into every line of his face. Judge Whittaker hammered a gavel, calling for order. As the evidence stands, the judge began gravely, Samuel Cartwright stands accused of armed robbery. If found guilty, we'll proceed to sentencing forthwith. Whispers rippled through the crowd, culminating in hushed anticipation. Sam braced himself. He was mere minutes away from condemnation. Just as the judge lifted his gavel to deliver the final verdict, a sudden commotion at the saloon doors drew every eye. Clara Bell burst into the room, cheeks flushed hair in slight disarray. She marched down the aisle, ignoring the stares. "Your Honor! Wait!" she cried out, breathless. "I need to speak." Judge Whittaker eyed her with some disapproval. "This is highly irregular. Who are you, young lady?" "My name is Clara Bell Woodward," she answered, standing before him with trembling knees. "And I have evidence that proves Sam Cartwright is innocent." A hush blanketed the room. Sam felt his heart thump wildly. What could this girl possibly have discovered? "Speak quickly," the judge instructed. "But be warned, if you lie before this court, you'll be in contempt." Clara Bell swallowed hard. She turned to the crowd, scanning anxious faces. Finally, with a deep breath, she declared, "Sam Cartwright couldn't have robbed that bank, because at the time of the robbery, he was with me." The town gasped. Even the judge leaned forward. Sam stared at her in baffled shock. He had no idea what she was talking about. The prosecutor jumped up. "That's hearsay. We have multiple witnesses." Clara Bell drew her shoulders back. "I'm not finished," she announced. "He was with me because we're husband and wife." A collective roar filled the saloon. The judge's gavel thundered for silence. Ross Charlton dropped his glass of whiskey eyes, practically bulging out of his skull. Sam's jaw fell open. Judge Whittaker hammered the gavel again. "Order, I will have order." Once the noise died down, the judge fixed Clara Bell with a stern look. "Miss Woodward, that is an extraordinary statement. You had best be prepared to explain yourself." Tears pricked Clara Bell's eyes, but she stood firm. "Sam Cartwright and I were wed in secret a few weeks ago," she said, voice wavering but resolute. "We didn't tell anyone because it's complicated." Sam's heart pounded. He found himself standing involuntarily, shackles clanking. "Clara, what are you doing?" he whispered. She shot him a frightened glance, then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we spent the day of the robbery together on Widow Parker's property. After he finished the roof, Sam and I. We were alone in the barn discussing our future, trying to figure out how to tell everyone. He never robbed that bank, I swear on my life." At that point, the courtroom was in an uproar. The prosecutor demanded proof of this supposed marriage. A marriage certificate may be a witness. The judge demanded to know how they could be wed without documentation. Tears trickled down Clara Bell's cheeks. Reverend Giles Harrington in the next county. He married us in his chapel, but he said he wouldn't sign the papers until we had proper witnesses. We promised we'd come back with them. We just never did. The story sounded tenuous. Yet in small frontier towns, unrecorded nuptials were not unheard of. The judge was torn, uncertain whether Clara Bell was telling a desperate lie or if there was some kernel of truth. Suddenly, Reverend Giles Harrington stepped forward from the back of the room. The crowd parted like waves. Sam's eyes widened. He had no idea the Reverend was in town. Harrington strode forward, a Bible clutched in one hand. He cleared his throat, glancing at Sam and Clara Bell with mild confusion. I was passing through this territory and heard of the trial. He began carefully. I do recall Miss Clara Bell coming to see me begging for a wedding ceremony, but I never actually married them. I refused because they lacked the necessary documents and I was short on time. So this is quite perplexing. Clara Bell paled. The judge's expression darkened. Are you telling me you did not marry them? Harrington shook his head slowly. No, Your Honor. They asked, but I said no. A stunned silence fell. The prosecutor's grin widened. The judge glared at Clara Bell with suspicion. Miss Woodward, he intoned ominously. Do you realize the severity of perjury? Clara Bell's eyes darted, her pulse pounding. But then the Reverend raised a hand. However, he said, I did sense Miss Woodward's desperation that day. She spoke of a man, Sam Cartwright, who had done her a kindness. She wished to repay him by any means necessary. I explained that marriage was a sacred bond, not an act of mere gratitude. She insisted she cared for him. I believed her sincerity, if not her timing. The judge eyed Harrington. This is all well and good, but none of this proves the alleged union. Reverend Harrington paused, focusing on Sam. I can confirm this much. Your Honor, Sam Cartwright never approached me for any wedding. Indeed, the entire notion might be Miss Woodward's misguided attempt to help him. But whether it's out of love or desperation, that remains for you to judge. Now it was Sam's turn to speak, though confusion knotted his thoughts. Your Honor, he said, stepping forward as far as his shackles allowed. I had no hand in this story. I don't know why Miss Clara Bell felt she had to lie. But I swear to you all I didn't rob that bank. I was on Widow Parker's roof. I've never even considered that life of crime. Clara Bell's face burned with shame, tears threatening. She cast her gaze downward, unable to meet Sam's eyes. The judge rubbed his temple in frustration. Enough confusion for one day. I'll tell you what we'll do. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. During that time, if Miss Woodward or anyone else can produce additional proof of Sam Cartwright's whereabouts, I will consider it. Otherwise, the court will move to sentencing. Sheriff Bradley escorted Sam back to the holding cell. The crowd dispersed, muttering about the fiasco. Ross Charlton and his cronies looked irritated. They'd been expecting an immediate guilty verdict. Clara Bell vanished into the throng before Sam could speak with her. Later, as Sam paced in his cell sleepless, he churned through every detail of the robbery, searching for a clue that might exonerate him. He knew in his bones that Ross Charlton was behind this frame job. But how to prove it? That night, the saloon was strangely quiet. With the trial paused, the gamblers had taken their amusements elsewhere. Ross Charlton sat at a table with Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy, discussing hush-hush matters over a game of poker. Across the room, Clara Bell hovered, trying to appear inconspicuous, hoping to overhear something that might incriminate Charlton. When she leaned in a bit too close, Clint Pomeroy seized her wrist. "Well, well," he sneered. "What do we have here?" "You lost, little girl." "Clara." Bell tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip. Ross Charlton eyed her, a slow grin spreading on his face. "Aren't you the one who caused all that commotion in court, claimed to be Sam Cartwright's wife?" That was quite a performance. She mustered her courage. "Let me go," she hissed. Ross leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "What's your angle, kid? Trying to play the hero? Because if so, you're meddling in affairs beyond your ken." Bert Walters clamped a hand over her mouth, dragging her to a corner of the saloon where no one was watching. Panic surged in her chest. "You listen here." Ross growled softly, stepping close enough for Clara Bell to smell the whiskey on his breath. "Sam Cartwright's going down, understand? The judge is one hair away from sending him to the noose. So if you think you can waltz in and claim him as your husband, you better have a death wish." Tears blurred Clara Bell's vision, but her defiance flared. "Why do you want to hurt Sam?" she demanded, voice muffled by Bert's palm. Ross chuckled darkly. "It's about time that fool paid for humiliating me all those years ago. He had the nerve to hold on to land that should have been mine. And now, with him out of the picture, I'll buy up what's left of his ranch at auction. I get everything." He nodded at Clint. "Tie her up and toss her in the back. We'll see if we can't scare the truth out of her. Or maybe we make sure she don't show up in that courtroom tomorrow at all." Clara Bell's heart thundered in her chest. She realized she was in mortal danger. She was the only one openly challenging Charlton's narrative. She wriggled frantically, trying to escape Bert's iron grip. But it was useless. Clint snickered, pulling out a rope. Just as all hope seemed lost, a figure lunged from the shadows. It was none other than Daniel Rodriguez, a traveling gunsmith who had been tinkering with repairs in the saloon's back room. He had overheard enough of the conversation to know this was foul play. "Unhand the lady," Daniel snarled, leveling a revolver at Ross Charlton's cohorts. Ross spun around, eyes narrowing. Clint and Bert, taken by surprise, hesitated. That pause gave Clara Bell the moment she needed. She stomped on Bert's foot and ducked under his arm, stumbling away. A tense standoff ensued. Ross glared at Daniel. "You got no dog in this fight, stranger. This is between us and the girl." Daniel cocked the hammer of his pistol. "Then consider me her guard dog," he said calmly. "Now back away before I put a bullet in you." Teeth clenched. Ross weighed his options. But with a gun aimed at them, Bert and Clint grudgingly stepped back. Clara Bell fled, tears streaming down her cheeks, adrenaline coursing through her. "Thank you," she gasped to Daniel, who nodded curtly. She bolted out into the night, determined to find another way to save Sam. Clara Bell wandered the darkened streets, a swirl of desperation clouding her thoughts. She questioned whether her grand gesture in the courtroom, claiming to be Sam's wife, was truly the right move. She needed proof, something that would tie Ross Charlton to the robbery. She decided to check the stable behind Ross's large home. Rumor had it Charlton lodged his prized horses there. Perhaps the stolen loot was hidden away. Heart pounding, she skulked around the perimeter of Charlton's grand barn. Lantern light flickered within. She slipped through a side door. The musky smell of hay and horse sweat mingled with the crisp night air. Carefully, she stepped around sleeping animals, scanning the shadows for any sign of sacks or crates. Then she froze. In a corner stall, she spied a black duster draped over a wooden stool. A red bandana lay crumpled nearby. Clara Bell's heart soared. This was the outfit described by the bank teller. She moved closer, noticing a small chest on the floor. She lifted the lid. Inside lay 2 sacks of coins, stamped with the bank's seal. Her hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Before she could think what to do next, a rough hand seized her shoulder. She whirled around to see Bert Walters. He had her pinned before she could make a sound. "Found you," he growled, slamming her against the stable wall. She struggled in vain, her mind racing. But to her astonishment, a second later, Bert yelped and went staggering forward. Clint Pomeroy had just arrived, presumably to help, but behind them stood Daniel Rodriguez again, brandishing a shovel. He'd followed her, suspecting she might do something risky. Bert and Clint turned on Daniel, fists swinging. The scuffle echoed through the stable. Daniel managed to clock Clint with the shovel, but Bert tackled him to the ground. Clara Bell seized the moment. She scooped up the black duster bandana and one of the coin sacks, then bolted out of the barn. She heard curses and grunts behind her, a testament that Daniel was fighting valiantly. For a fleeting second, guilt stabbed her for leaving him behind, but she knew she had to get this evidence to Sheriff Bradley, or Sam would surely hang. Clara Bell sprinted across town, ignoring the burning in her lungs and legs. Dawn would come soon, and the court session was set to resume in a few hours. She had to get the evidence to the sheriff. But then fear gripped her. Would Sheriff Bradley even believe her? Would Charlton's influence extend that far? Arriving at the sheriff's office, Clara Bell banged on the door. She panted, tears mixing with sweat, as a bleary-eyed deputy opened up. "I have evidence," she gasped, brandishing the duster bandana and sack of coins. "This is the gear used in the robbery. It was hidden in Ross Charlton's barn." Sheriff Bradley, awakened by the commotion, strode in. He took one look at the items and swore under his breath. For a moment, he just stared, his mind turning wheels. Then he nodded brusquely. "All right," he said. "We'll hold on to this as evidence. I'll have a man fetch Ross Charlton for questioning." Clara Bell sagged with relief. "You have to release Sam," she pleaded. Bradley pressed his lips into a thin line. "I can't do that just yet. We need a formal hearing. Judge Whitaker has to see this. But trust me, Miss Woodward, you've done Sam a world of good tonight." Hours later, the sun climbed over the horizon, painting Stone Tree Gulch in shades of gold. The townsfolk gathered once more in the saloon courtroom. Speculation buzzed, rumors flew that Clara Bell had uncovered shocking evidence, while others believed it was a last-ditch attempt to sow confusion. Sam was brought in, still in handcuffs, but a ripple of curiosity passed through the crowd when they saw him. Standing behind Sam, eyes puffy from lack of sleep, was Clara Bell. In her arms, she cradled the black duster and bandana. The tension was palpable. Judge Whitaker banged his gavel. "This court is now in session. Sheriff Bradley. Do you have new evidence?" The sheriff nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor. Late last night, Miss Clara Bell Woodward discovered the clothing and stolen bank funds in Ross Charlton's barn. We believe it to be the exact outfit worn by the robber, along with sacks of coin from the Stone Tree Gulch Bank and Trust." A collective gasp echoed. All eyes shot to Ross Charlton, who sat in the corner shifting uncomfortably. Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy were conspicuously absent, likely still nursing bruises or in hiding. The prosecutor, Ernest Hardy, sputtered. That's circumstantial. Charlton could have been framed. But Sheriff Bradley held up the coin sacks, marked by the bank distinctive brand. My deputies can testify that it was found in Charlton's barn. Unless Mr. Charlton can explain how it got there, I'd say the evidence is pretty damning. Charlton rose from his seat, face contorted with rage. That's a lie. She snuck in and planted those things. Judge Whittaker's brows arched. If that's true, Mr. Charlton, do you have an alibi for the time of the robbery? Ross opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he'd never prepared an alibi. Desperate, he pointed at Sam. Cartwright's a snake. He set me up. Sam glared back. Why would I set you up when I'm the one on trial for my life? At that moment, the saloon doors burst open again. Daniel Rodriguez limped in, sporting a swollen lip. He raised his hand. Your Honor, I witnessed Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy. Mr. Charlton's men attacking Miss Woodward. She found that evidence at great personal risk. I'd be happy to testify that she had no chance to plant anything as Mr. Charlton claims. All at once, the puzzle pieces were falling into place for the crowd. The judge eyed Ross Charlton with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. Sheriff, place Mr. Charlton under arrest pending a full investigation, he said. The sheriff and a deputy seized Charlton. He struggled and cursed, but found no mercy in the eyes of his fellow townsfolk. With Charlton in custody, Sam Cartwright stood before the judge, still in chains. Judge Whittaker cleared his throat. In light of this new evidence, it appears Sam Cartwright did not commit the robbery. Mr. Cartwright, you are released from all charges. The deputy unlocked Sam's shackles, and the room erupted in applause, relief, and disbelief. Clara Bell stood off to the side, exhaustion weighing heavily on her slight frame. Sam stepped forward, rubbed his sore wrists, then did something that shocked everyone. He crossed the room to Clara Bell and pulled her into a tight embrace. The crowd fell silent, watching this emotional display with rapt attention. Sam gently parted from her eyes, filled with gratitude. Miss Clara Bell, he whispered. I can't begin to thank you. But you nearly got yourself killed. She smiled weakly. It was the least I could do, for someone who showed me kindness when no one else would. Meanwhile, the judge rapped his gavel again. Now there's another matter to address, he said, a wry smile twisting his lips. Miss Woodward, you gave sworn testimony that you and Mr. Cartwright are husband and wife. That testimony proved to be false, or at least unverified. Clara Bell's cheeks flamed. She cast her eyes down. Sam, uncertain how to respond, stood up straighter, a protective urge stirring in him. Judge Whittaker's tone softened. Given the circumstances, and considering your actions helped uncover the truth, I will not charge you with perjury. But I urge you to reflect on the seriousness of lying under oath. We are a lawful town, and false testimony undermines our system of justice. Clara Bell nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said, softly. I never meant to mislead the court. I just couldn't watch an innocent man die. The judge gave her a look of understanding. Court is dismissed, he declared. Sam Cartwright is a free man, and we will proceed with charges against Ross Charlton. With that, the crowd began dispersing, leaving behind a wake of conversation and speculation about the drama that had just unfolded. Outside, Sam and Clara Bell stood under the morning sun. A mild breeze stirred the heat-rustling tumbleweeds along the road. Sam pressed a hand gently to Clara Bell's shoulder, noticing how thin she was, how tired. "You lied in court to save me," he said softly. "Why?" She looked at the ground. "You were the first man to show me kindness in a long time. I owed you my life, I guess." She sniffed, wiping her eyes. "I can't say I did it right, but at least you're not behind bars anymore." Sam felt a pang of guilt. He realized how alone and vulnerable she truly was. "I'd like to repay your kindness if you'll let me," he said. "I've still got some coin saved from selling my cattle. I can help you get on your feet." Clara Bell started to protest, but her pride was no match for the exhaustion and relief coursing through her. She finally nodded, tears brimming again. "Thank you, Sam. But I don't want to be a burden." Sam shook his head. "Helping you is no burden, Clara Bell. If anything, I'm in your debt." Ross Charlton was promptly tried for armed robbery. Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy were tracked down and arrested as accomplices. Through their confessions and the testimony of Daniel Rodriguez, the full story emerged. Charlton had orchestrated the heist, hoping to pin it on Sam Cartwright. He planned to use the stolen money to buy Sam's land at auction once Sam was hanged. It was a cruel, intricate plot born of long-standing bitterness. With Charlton behind bars, many in town whispered that justice was finally served. But the cost had been high to Sam's peace of mind, Clara Bell's innocence, and the entire town's sense of unity. Days turned into weeks. Sam, now exonerated, found that his name was gradually cleared. A few townsfolk who once eyed him with suspicion now tipped their hats in respect. Sheriff Bradley offered him a small contract to patrol the outskirts for rustlers, a job Sam took on to earn some honest wages. He rented a modest cottage near the old ranch he had once owned. Sarah's grave lay on a small knoll behind the original homestead. Sam visited it often, leaving flowers and talking to her in hushed tones, explaining the whirlwind of events. Clara Bell stayed in a spare room at the Reverend's humble lodging. Reverend Harrington, upon seeing the heroic lengths she went to protect Sam, softened his stance. He helped her find odd jobs cleaning and occasionally reading to the elderly. Yet whenever Sam and Clara Bell crossed paths, there remained an unspoken tension. They had been thrust into a forced intimacy, a mock marriage for the sake of survival and justice. Though neither knew quite what to make of it, an undeniable bond had formed under the bright scrutiny of a frontier town. One afternoon, Sam knocked on the Reverend's door, hat in hand. Clara Bell answered, looking slightly flushed. Sam she greeted softly, stepping aside to let him in. They sat in the Reverend's small parlor, the sunlight streaking through dusty windows. After a moment of silence, Sam cleared his throat. "I'm heading out to the old ranch. Thought maybe you'd like to join me." Clara Bell blinked uncertain. "Why?" Sam shrugged, his gaze lowered. "Sarah's gone. The place is quiet, lonely. But it's mine. I've been thinking about starting over, maybe clearing the land, raising some livestock again." He paused, looking at Clara Bell earnestly. "I could use some help. And I figure you might use a place where you can build a life." Clara Bell's eyes widened. Are you saying I can stay there with you?" Sam felt a flicker of embarrassment. He had no illusions about how it might look to others. "I'm saying I'd pay you for your help, give you a place to live where you won't have to scrounge for food or fear for your life. You saved me from the noose. The least I can do is offer you a chance at stability." Clara Bell's heart pounded. She recalled how it felt to lie in that courtroom, the scorching stares of the townspeople. Yet here was Sam, a man she admired and pitied and respected all at once. Yes, "I'd like that," she replied. The next few months saw them working side by side on the ranch, filling holes in the fences, brushing out the stables, planting a small vegetable patch. They rarely spoke of the trial or the lie about their marriage, but a certain comfort settled between them. At times, Clara Belle sensed Sam's lingering grief. Sometimes she'd catch him gazing at a faded photograph of Sarah. His eyes were misty with remembrance. Clara Belle never intruded on those private moments. She too was searching for peace. They fell into a companionable rhythm. Sam taught Clara Belle how to ride a horse. She cooked simple meals while he finished chores. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch sipping tea and watching the sun dip below the dusty horizon. Occasionally, a neighbor would drop by, eyes flicking curiously at the arrangement. A widower cowboy living with a young woman who once claimed quite publicly to be his wife. But Sam and Clara Belle carried themselves with quiet dignity, ignoring the murmurs. One evening, they were repairing a splintered trough when Clara Belle lost her grip and nearly dropped a hammer on her foot. Sam lunged, caught it, and set it aside. Their eyes met, and for a moment they both froze. There was a warmth there, an unspoken connection forged from shared adversity. Clara Belle looked away, cheeks burning. Her voice trembled. "Sam, about what I said in court." He laid a hand gently on her arm. "Don't," he said softly. "You were trying to help." Her voice cracked. I feel like I took advantage of your grief. I'm so sorry." He let out a weary sigh. "You saved my life. I'm only sorry you had to lie to do it. But truth is, I'm thankful every day you did." Silence cloaked them for a spell. Only the chirp of cicadas and the soft nickering of horses broke the hush. Then Clara Belle found her voice again. "What if we went back to the Reverend?" she asked, eyes downcast. Sam frowned, not immediately catching her meaning. "Why would we?" She lifted her gaze, tears glimmering. "What if we made it true?" The words hung in the air like a drawn pistol at high noon. Sam swallowed hard, heart pounding. For the first time, he saw Clara Belle not just as the girl who rescued him or the friend who shared his ranch. He saw her as a woman, brave, loyal, with a beauty born of spirit rather than finery. But within that moment, a wave of memories. His late wife, Sarah, their short life together, the ache of losing her, flooded him. He stepped back, looking away, as guilt churned in his gut. I don't know," he muttered. "I'm not sure I'm ready to." Clara Belle's lips trembled. She turned aside, nodding quickly. "I understand," she whispered through sorrow etched her features. That night, Sam tossed in bed, haunted by the memory of Sarah's final days. She had urged him on her deathbed to find happiness again. "Promise me you'll live, Sam," she had said in a frail voice. "Promise me you'll love again." He had promised, though at the time it felt impossible to keep. Now, across the thin wall, Clara Belle likely lay awake, wondering if Sam would accept her into his heart, for real, not just for show. At dawn, Sam saddled up lightning. He left a note on the kitchen table, telling Clara Belle he had to ride into town for some business. He needed time to think. He rode for hours, passing by the little cemetery where Sarah lay. He dismounted, knelt by her grave, and let the tears flow. "Sarah," he murmured, voice cracking. "I never thought I'd meet someone else who'd care about me." But this girl, she saved me. And she's kind. I want to honor my promise to you. But I'm scared. Scared of losing someone else. Scared of betraying you. The wind whispered through the dry grass. Sam closed his eyes as though expecting some spectral answer from his departed wife. In his mind's eye, he saw her smile, the gentle, forgiving smile that had once brightened his world. Live, she seemed to say. Love. By the time Sam returned home, the sun was setting. Clara Bell sat on the porch, anxiously twisting her hands. She startled when she saw him. Sam, She began rising to greet him. He dismounted and climbed the steps. Stopping in front of her, he removed his hat, fiddling with the brim. He took a steadying breath. Clara Bell, he said in a low, earnest voice. What you did for me, it wasn't just an act of kindness. You risked your life. You gave me reason to fight. I'd be honored if you'd truly become my wife. Her lips parted in shock. But earlier you... He shook his head. I had to lay some ghosts to rest. He gathered her hands in his calloused palms. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I still carry wounds, but I can promise I'll cherish you for as long as I walk this earth. Clara Bell's eyes welled with tears, and she let out a relieved laugh. Yes, Sam, I will. A week later, under a blazing summer sun, Sam Cartwright and Clara Bell Woodward were wed in a simple ceremony at the church in Stone Tree Gulch. Reverend Giles Harrington presided, smiling at the young couple who some months before had stumbled into his chapel with a half-baked plan to marry. This time the papers were in proper order, and they had plenty of witnesses. Daniel Rodriguez was among them, beaming proudly. Townsfolk who once whispered rumors about Clara Bell and Sam now watched approvingly, recalling how she risked all to prove his innocence. After the ceremony, well-wishers gathered for a modest celebration behind the church. Sam offered a toast, his voice thick with emotion. To my wife, he said, raising a cup. She saved my life in more ways than one. Cheers erupted. Clara Bell blushed fiercely, gratefulness radiating through her. This time there was no lie. She stood at Sam's side, his lawful partner prepared to face the future together. In the months that followed, the ranch, once known as Cartwright's homestead, thrived anew. Sam and Clara Bell expanded their herds, grew their crops, and slowly replaced broken boards and rusted hinges with sturdy new ones. Their love story became a legend in Stone Tree Gulch, how a struggling widower cowboy faced trial alone, and how a poor young girl's bold declaration, "He's my husband," shifted destiny's course. On quiet evenings, Sam and Clara Bell would sit by the fireplace reflecting on how a desperate lie had brought them an unexpected truth. Sam found a renewed sense of purpose not just in ranching, but in protecting the woman who had risked everything for him. They were not without challenges. The land was harsh, the winters fierce, and the memory of Sarah lingered in the corners of Sam's heart. But Clara Bell never begrudged his love for his late wife. She understood that a broken heart leaves scars. Over time, those scars blended into the fabric of their lives, forging a bond of compassion and respect. Whenever word came that Ross Charlton's trial date approached, or that his accomplices might seek vengeance, Sam would glance at Clara Bell, see her steadfast determination, and realize he was no longer alone in the fight. Ross Charlton eventually faced a formal territorial trial. Bert Walters and Clint Pomeroy, in exchange for reduced sentences, confessed that the robbery was orchestrated by Charlton. The evidence was overwhelming: the stolen bank funds, the black duster, the red bandana. A stream of witnesses, including Daniel Rodriguez and Clara Bell herself, dismantled any pretense of innocence. The judge sentenced Charlton to 15 years of hard labor, a lighter punishment than many believed he deserved, but frontier courts were often unpredictable. Some claimed Charlton had bribed someone to avoid the rope. Regardless, his power and prestige evaporated. The feud that had cost Sam so much, from property disputes to false accusations, was finally put to rest. As they rode home after the trial, Sam felt an odd sense of closure. "He can't hurt us anymore," Clara Bell whispered, squeezing Sam's hand. He nodded, looking toward the horizon where the sun dipped behind rolling hills. Seasons turned. Stone Tree Gulch grew more bustling as new settlers arrived. Sam and Clara Bell built a sturdier house on the ranch's highest ridge. They welcomed a few ranch hands to assist with the burgeoning livestock operation. Reverend Giles Harrington visited regularly, marveling at the transformation in both Sam and Clara Bell. "You two truly are a testament to faith and redemption," he told them over dinner one evening. "Sometimes the greatest blessings come in the unlikeliest packages." Sam quietly agreed. If someone had told him a year ago that he would remarry, that the scrawny young girl he'd offered a few coins would become not just his salvation but his partner in life, he would have dismissed it as a fantasy. Yet here they were, forging a future day by day. One day Sam found Clara Bell out by the corral, brushing the mane of a gentle mare. He held up a small envelope, looking bemused. "I rode into town for supplies and found this waiting at the post office," he said, waving the letter. Clara Bell set aside the brush. "Who's it from?" "It's from my sister Evelyn," Sam said, opening the letter carefully. He read silently, his eyes traveling across the page. Then he glanced at Clara Bell, his expression thoughtful. "She wants to come visit. Says she heard I remarried and wants to meet my new wife." Clara Bell tensed. Are you sure you're all right with that?" He took her hand gently. "Yes. I want her to meet you. She always loved Sarah. I'm a bit nervous, but maybe it's time." When Evelyn arrived a week later, carrying a small satchel and wide-eyed curiosity, Sam introduced Clara Bell with quiet pride. Evelyn was gracious, hugging Clara Bell warmly, tears welling up when she saw how Sam smiled again. "This place feels alive again," Evelyn said, glancing around the ranch's improvements. "Clara Bell, you've done wonders for my brother's spirit." In that moment, Clara Bell felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, a realization that she was no longer that frightened orphan, scrounging for scraps. She had a family now. Over time, the story of Sam Cartwright's trial passed into local law. Newcomers heard rumors of how a widower cowboy nearly swung from the gallows, saved only by the shocking claim of a poor girl who declared herself his wife. Some recounted the event as scandalous gossip, while others viewed it as a testament to the power of compassion and truth. Sam and Clara Bell rarely brought it up, except to reflect on how it shaped them. Life on the ranch was not easy. Droughts, storms, livestock illnesses, and the ever-present threat of rustlers kept them vigilant. But together, they weathered each challenge, forging an unbreakable partnership. And each night when Sam came in from the fields, dusty and weary, he would find Clara Bell waiting, a lantern lit by the window. Sometimes he would pause in the doorway, heart swelling with gratitude. "I'm home," he'd say softly. I'm glad she'd reply, setting aside whatever chore occupied her. They would share a simple meal, then sit on the porch as the stars came out, exchanging stories of the day and quiet laughter. Years later, Sam Cartwright, once a broken widower, once a wrongly accused man, stood tall under the wide western sky. The lines on his face spoke of both hardships endured and joys discovered. Next to him, Clara Bell shone with quiet confidence, her eyes reflecting the gentle strength that had once driven her to risk it all in a dusty saloon courtroom. They had children, a boy and a girl, who played among the ranch's rolling hills. Sam taught them to ride, to respect the land, and to always stand by what's right, no matter the cost. Clara Bell taught them to be compassionate, to give kindness freely, for you never know whose life you might save. On the anniversary of Sam's second chance a day, that had once been marked for his sentencing, he would take a moment to reflect. He would remember the dread of standing before a judge, the astonishment of hearing Clara Bell's trembling words. "He's my husband." Those words, spoken in desperation, had reshaped his entire world. From tragedy sprang redemption, from a desperate lie emerged unwavering truth, and from sorrow blossomed a love that anchored them against every storm the frontier could conjure. And so the legend of Sam Cartwright and Clara Bell Woodward endured a testament that sometimes in the harshest climates and under the cruelest suns, an unexpected seed of hope can take root, flourish, and bear the sweetest fruit imaginable. Thank you, dear friends, for joining us on this unforgettable journey into the wild frontier, where innocence was tested and love was forged in the fires of adversity. The story of Samuel Cartwright, a grieving widower who faced an unjust trial, and Clara Bell Woodward, the impoverished girl whose bold lie saved him, reminds us all that hope can spring from the darkest places, and that sometimes fate nudges two strangers together to create a bond stronger than steel. If this tale of courage, loyalty, and redemption touched your heart, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that celebrate the enduring human spirit. Spread the word to anyone who loves a good yarn about unexpected heroes, frontier justice, and the triumph of true love. Until next time, keep your spirit wild and your heart open to life's greatest adventures.